Welcome into Backstretch Banter on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio Channel 90. I'm Chris Childers. Great to be back. We got 2 races left to go, and then finally we can get to the off season. I know everybody at RFK has been looking forward to the off season and building for Daytona. We're going to have a great show today. Kevin Woods hanging out with us today from RFK. He is what is your official title? You're like fancy media guy, or
I do whatever they tell me to do, Chris.
Man?
Whatever they tell me to do.
I'm going to call you the communications czar of RFK. How about that?
I think I'm over marketing and communications here, but it's really just because I'm the last one on the island. Everybody else left. So every time somebody leaves, they just hand you something else to do. So if you stay here long enough, you can just be over a lot.
They add another title. Jamie McMurray is with us today. Everybody loves Jamie, knows Jamie. Great career as a racer, spent some time with Roush. We see him all the time as a member of the media. Certainly one of my favorite guys in the media when it comes to NASCAR. Jamie, thanks a lot for taking a little time out, coming back. You were talking to Woods a minute ago that when you walked in the door, some of the memories came flooding back. How long's it been since you've been in this building?
Yeah, the last time I was here was, I think, 2009, 2010, somewhere right then. I would say that I love the way you started the show. You were so excited, and you went to Kevin, and Kevin, a corpse could have been more excited than what he was as he responded to you. It was great.
Well,
it's Halloween. Ready for the off season too. I think everybody.
Yeah, he's tired.
Like, can we just get to the end?
Like
2 weeks left. 2 weeks left, and certainly there's 8 drivers that are not feeling that right now. They have a lot to drive for. I guess we should start there since you are in the midst of it. You cover the sport. What do you make of the playoffs so far from an entertainment perspective, and how you feeling about this final race before we get to the last 4?
Well, Homestead was a 10. I mean, you just couldn't have gotten a better finish. The fact that Reddick went from 3rd to being able to win the race on the white flag lap is just amazing. Also at a tire deficit. I watch all of the races, and I came up off the couch at the end of that. I'm like, I can't believe he's going to pull that off. And as a driver, I would say that we had the Hell Melon move years ago, and everyone talked about that. And I heard a lot of drivers critique that and say, well, it didn't take a lot of skill. It took a lot of courage, but not a lot of skill to do what Ross did. I would tell you that every driver would like to be in the position that Reddick was in going into turn 3, and to be able to put it on the outside and make it stick, not get into the wall, and then race your way into Championship 4. On top of it being an incredible move, as I watched at home, I just couldn't help but think how awesome it would be to have Michael Jordan come up and congratulate you. I mean, we're all, huge sports fans, and I mean, that guy is, it's one of the biggest names in the world, and it's fun every week to see him at the racetrack, but I would say to get to have that moment with him on pit road, that's got to be a cool memory for Reddick.
100%, like one of the coolest memories for Reddick. I grew up in Chicago, and I grew up going to Bulls games, and I saw MJ play like 30 times in person. So to me, he's like a king. So I cannot imagine having King Jordan being your boss, and you're pleasing him and making him happy. That's a pretty cool thing. No question about that. I am curious, and we'll get into your days at Roush and all that throughout the show today. But the playoff system itself, we have talked on this show the last couple of weeks since Brad was eliminated, how a lot of us are just kind of waiting until the end of the season, looking forward to the off season. Is this an effective way to determine a champion, or is there any better way where you can kind of include the rest of the field at the end where everybody's not as checked out?
Yeah. So I would just say that I like the format the way it is, and I say that because if you are a driver that's trying to make the playoffs, right before the regular season's over, those 5 or 6 weeks leading up to that, that's kind of what TV covers. They cover the winner of the race, but they also really focus on those that need a win to get in and those that are trying to point their way in. So the focus on the season is kind of around that group of drivers. And then once you get in, obviously we forget about those that didn't make the playoffs. But then you start focusing on each of these rounds, and I you can nitpick it apart however you would like. I like the excitement of the 3 races. I get the frustration from some of the drivers that would like to have more races or a little bit of a different format. But I would tell you that from an entertainment perspective, and the fact that I don't, Joey, you could maybe say is kind of an outlier in this because he hasn't had as good of a season as some of the guys they're going to miss out on the championship for, but I think you have to give him credit, being able to suck it up when he needed to and get that win at Vegas. But I like it. I like the excitement. I thought it was incredible at Homestead. When I looked up at 7, the top 7 were all guys that needed to get a good finish, whether it's points or a win to get in. That was your playoff guys, and to me, that's what this part of the year is all about.
I think that's interesting, Jamie, because if you think back, because we're going to talk about your early days here in a minute, but when you made your debut in 2002, but we're talking about this format. I can remember back then, by August, this thing was narrowed down to 3 people.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's complaining now because, you only narrow it down, and once you're out of the playoffs, you're gone. But literally, you knew the champion down to 3 people before Bristol.
Yeah, and even those 3, you almost kind of knew who it was going to be anyway, as long as they were able to, to finish all the races or not have a disaster. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's just human nature to want to complain, and we're all really good at complaining. But the excitement of these races and the pressure that puts on the drivers and the teams, really from the beginning of the playoffs. And as I looked at Larson being a great example, he had the most playoff points. He kept having issues in the first race of each round, and all of a sudden he was putting himself in a position that he didn't, wasn't just survival. He needed to get some points. So I like it. I mean, it is exciting, and it's unfortunate there's some people that miss out, but that's sports.
I think it's a lot more representative of other sports where
it is.
You can't just win all your games and not win in the playoffs. It's kind of the way it works.
Yeah. I like that we have the reward also for the regular season champion. That this year came down to 1 point between Reddick and Larson. I mean, that was exciting at that point of the season to see who's going to be able to get that. And then when Denny got the penalty, and lost all his playoff points, all the drama that leads around that, I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I am too. It's great from a fan's perspective. I guess the only pushback, that I would say is like, you don't see the White Sox in the World Series right now. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have.
Are you comparing Joey?
Impacting.
Is Joey your White Sox?
No. I'm just saying, like, the typical back of the pack drivers that are going to be out there the next 2 weeks could have an impact on who wins the championship for, lap traffic, whatever. So, that's the one thing that's kind of interesting about NASCAR is that we're out for a championship, but everybody has a say-so in how this thing is going to shake out, which is actually kind of cool when you think about it. I get what you guys are saying and totally agree with it. Jamie McMurray is our guest, who's a former Roush driver and a Fox media star these days. The coverage on Fox has been fantastic. Race Hub, when you were on there, I thought was one of the great shows when it came to teaching NASCAR, when it came to teaching fans the nuances. Do you think, and certainly I think we all miss it, do you think NASCAR education right now is as good as it needs to be as we bring more fans into the sport? Because to me, what that show did is if you were finding NASCAR, it was a way to really learn about the nuance of the science behind it.
Yeah, and we always viewed Hub as most people that would watch Race Hub were diehard fans. And you could get into, honestly, a little deeper discussion or talk about more nuts and bolts than you could on a broadcast on Fox where you have just casual fans join in to watch the race. It's just kind of treetops. But Hub's going to be missed for sure. I mean, to get to be on FS1 every day at 6 p.m. People, it didn't matter if you went to a restaurant to eat dinner. Like, it was always on. It was always on in the background. Even if you couldn't hear it, you would see Larry or Adam or Shannon or I or whoever the regulars were each week on the show. And I hope that we can get back to having a daily show because I think that's needed and it's clearly missed. I still go to the racetracks every weekend with my kid. Every weekend I have multiple fans come up to me and talk to me about how much they miss Race Hub. I know NASCAR through True TV has been doing a show once a week on the playoffs. I hope that's able to develop in to a little bit more. I don't know if we ever get back to a daily show. I hope we do. I personally really enjoyed Race Hub. It was just a great way to talk about things that we maybe didn't get to hit on in the pre-race show or during the race. And I loved, they had this next level segment where you would kind of break down whether it was a a crash or a like the Reddick pass this weekend would have been something great to be able to break down and show how that started, at the start finish line, Reddick's, move into turns 1 and 2. There's just a lot of stories to be able to tell, and I miss getting to do Hub, and I know the fans miss it, and I hope at some point, guys, we get to have that back.
That's why I brought it up, because I loved it. It was religious for me every single day. I loved it so much, and it was really how I learned about the sport. I was kind of I don't know, I fell in love with NASCAR about a decade ago. I wasn't my entire life. My sister was involved working with it, and so that's how I learned, and I was invaluable for me. So kudos to everybody involved. Woods, what else you got for Jamie?
I guess we'll go. I remember when it was inside Winston Cup. Remember that? It was like 4 guys.
That was when the trash truck would come and get the dumpster every day. Yeah, that was a good time.
That was good stuff. Let's talk about your start in 2002. You fill in for Sterling Marlin, who's injured, and basically your second race, you go out and, as Jack would say, trip the lot. Fantastic. Dominate the Coke 600. Get you. Did you think it was going to be pretty easy at that point?
It appeared that way, didn't it? No, I didn't. I grew up. I don't know. Honestly, up until that point that I ever felt like I was in the best equipment, whether it was the truck teams I was with, the late model teams, everything was always, there was always someone that had better stuff. And when I got the opportunity to go to Ganassi, I remember going to the shop and just being kind of overwhelmed at how nice everything was, how every weekend the car looked brand new. It was a whole different level of racing. And Charlotte being my second start, we were able to win. I didn't think it was going to take, 300 more starts to get my second win, but I knew it wasn't going to be as easy as it appeared. But yeah, great memory being able to win. And I had just moved to Charlotte when I won here. I didn't realize the significance of how important this race was until, moving here and then kind of being a part of it for many years to come. But yeah, special day.
A real quick correction. It wasn't the Coke 600. It was the fall race. Mark had won the Coke 600, so I guess that's on my mind. And actually, the car you got in was we was talking about the point system, and that was actually one of the about 4 cars at that time that, until Sterling had gotten injured, was in that playoff.
I mean, he if he hadn't been injured, I most likely would have won the championship that year. Dodge had just come into the sport. They had Ganassi at the time, I arguably had the fastest cars, definitely on like 1.5-mile type tracks, 2-mile tracks. The downforce tracks, they were really good at. They had good engines at the time. And yeah, my first cup race I ever attended was earlier that year at Richmond when they made the announcement. The following week, I went to Richmond or to Kansas where Sterling got in a wreck, and none of us even knew that he was hurt because he went home and it was just another wreck. And then I got a phone call on Monday or Tuesday, and I was scheduled actually to drive at Talladega anyway in the 42 car, which I can't remember, it was the Melling car at the time. They were just going to put the sponsor and the name on that car, and they're like, listen, Sterling's hurt, and we're gonna put you in the 40 car. And it was super, super nerve-wracking for me though, because I'd only been to a cup race once 2 weeks prior to that, and I still viewed Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, all of these drivers that I was going to get to race. I was a fan. Like it was pretty overwhelming at the time.
So you've been to one cup race in your first starts at Talladega.
Yeah, and there was no caution flags. That's what I remember. I'd never, at that time, through trucks and Xfinity, Busch Series at the time, I had never made a green flag pit stop. Talladega didn't have any cautions. So I made and actually we went through Talladega and I think like the first 2 pit stops at Charlotte the next week, and it was all green. They were all green flag pit stops. So I was getting an education. But yeah, Talladega, and I think we would have run the top 5 at Talladega. They had really good speedway cars at the time at Ganassi. And I ran out of gas on coming into the last pit stop. They had miscalculated, I guess, and ran out of gas. But yeah, Talladega.
Do you remember, you talk about championships, in that race, Mark, because it was Mark and Tony Stewart pretty much for the championship at this point in time, and something happened with his steering box or something. I don't know if you remember this. It's before the race started. He came over, he hit Jimmy Johnson, he went through the infield under the pace lap.
So I remember, I didn't realize that was the race I was in. I remember seeing that visual probably on Inside Winston Cup the next day. But I did not realize that was my. Yeah, I do. I remember.
So
all of that.
the funny thing is he's super fast, and they make him come down, which is kind of crazy because I don't know. I mean, this is why race car drivers are a different breed. Because if I'm him and I'm driving and my car just goes in, I don't have the guts to go 200 miles an hour. The rest, but they went in, they raised the hood, looked at it, went back out, right?
Fixed it. Yeah.
Yeah, fixed it. And but the funny thing is he's super fast. So if it's any other Talladega race ever, there's 10 cautions, a big
Right,
one.
you have plenty of time to catch up.
He never gets his lap back. He runs at the front of the field the entire race,
Never got his lap
a
back.
lap down, and pretty much, if you go do the math, lost the championship that day.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. That's a good fun fact, Kevin. You've
There you
come
go.
to life. All
Yeah,
of a
we
sudden. I like
came
it.
to life. So on that
He
note,
doesn't bring the energy, Jamie. but
Yeah, that was good. I like
We'll
it. You
give
got
him that.
excited there.
So on that note, Mark Martin, he's going to, at this point in time, he's looking to do something different. And at some point in time, are you approached about coming here and taking the 6 car, correct?
Wow, you're bringing back, some memories. I forgot about that. Mark, I was at Ganassi. And, the interesting part about driving for Ganassi for those few years is that I don't know that I appreciated how good their cars were because that wasn't known as one of the big teams. It was, Hendrick or Roush. And at that time, Roush had hit on some stuff at like 1.5 mile tracks. And if I remember correctly, they won 17 races in 2005. I just remember if you went to 1.5 miles, a Roush car won. You didn't know which of the 4 or 5 were going to win, but they all could win. And so, Mark came to me and he's like, listen, of course, now we know all the facts, it's a little different, but he's like, I'm going to retire at the end of 2006. And he's like, I'd like for you to, be the guy that takes over the 6 car. And I was very humbled and honored that he had asked that because that was such an iconic car. And Mark Martin, I mean, he was, one of the best ever to race in NASCAR. So what a cool moment for me. But then Kurt got in trouble in Phoenix later that year, and it actually all ended up happening a year earlier, and I didn't get in the 6 car. I ended up getting in what was the 97, and we made the 26. Yeah, I forgot about Mark approaching me. That's a good bring back.
That's kind of wild. And the 26 is where you stayed from 2006 to 2009. You mentioned how Roush, you get there, it has all the bells and whistles. What was your perception of the attitude and energy of Roush before, and what is it now? Now that we have Brad involved, it's RFK, it's a 2-car stable, maybe the friendly underdog with championship, legacy, but compare then and now from your perception.
It was not good then. It was not a good environment. Military is what I think of when I think about Roush. Yeah, I mean, it was very cold. I just remember Reiser, one of the guys, saying, let me tell you something. He's like, there's 5 dogs here and there's only 4 bones. You better get in there and get a bone. Like, it was so different than Ganassi. The thing, let me back up just a little bit.
Sure.
Chip Ganassi he would tell you did a good job if you did a good job. But he was always the first guy. If things didn't go well, he'd call you on Sunday night and he'd be like, listen, we're going to get it fixed. We believe in you. Like he always would pump you up when things were down. And that motivated me. And that's, for me, my personality. I wanted that. I needed that. Jack was the exact opposite of that. Jack, I just remember you'd get in these Tuesday meetings, the Jack meeting. I hated him. Like, I don't think anybody liked him. And if you ran the worst of the 5 cars, it was just hell. Like, Jack he just beat you down. And I just remember financially Roush was really good. It was incredible at the time. Yeah. But the emotions, the memories of me driving by this building still to this day, like I tell my kids, when we drive by here, I'm like, that place was hell. That's what I remember. I dreaded coming here. It just wasn't a good environment for me. And since then, I mean, like Jack, I've obviously still talked to him, and he's it's all good now. But at the time, he was a tough one.
Let's take a break. Chris Childers, Kevin Woods from RFK, Jamie McMurray is our guest from Fox Sports, former Roush driver. Let's continue the conversation when we come back on Sirius XM, NASCAR Radio, Channel 9. We're back here, NASCAR Radio, Sirius XM, Channel 90. It is Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. I'm your host, Chris Childers. Kevin Woods Hosting with me today from RFK, Director of Marketing and Communications, something like that. He's got many responsibilities. He's very important. And Jamie McMurray hanging out with us today, former Roush driver. Everybody sees him all the time on Fox these days, talking about our great sport of NASCAR. We were just getting into the Roush years with Jamie and the atmosphere and how it was different than Chip Ganassi. It was Chip maybe a little more supportive back in the day. Jack maybe not so much. But Jack now, I mean, every time I see him at the track nowadays and he's talking to Buescher, he seems like a loving grandfather. So what is your perception of Jack's evolution?
Well, I mean, all that's changed. And I remember, honestly, when Brad came over here, it seems to me like the whole environment is different now. And I haven't been I haven't really been behind the scenes here since Brad's taken over, but just everything about, I think the whole organization is completely different than when I was here 20 years ago. And go ahead.
No. I was saying, no, it's evolved. I mean, every loving grandpa used to be a mean dad, right?
That's right.
And
yeah.
I was laughing because I did
That's true.
When Mark went to Ginn, I went with Ginn with him. We ended up getting absorbed by DEI. So
right.
So every day I live off of 3. I drive by and I get that same like
thing.
chill, and I kind of give him a wave, and and I understand what you mean, and it's different cultures. They're not for everybody,
right?
And it was a hard, I can remember starting here. I've been here a little over 22 years, I think. And I remember the first 3 weeks I'm here telling my parents, like, I'm going to get fired. Like, this place is harsh.
It's
like,
tough.
And ultimately, I kind of ultimately, weave my way into that. But, I could see coming into it. And for you, all of a sudden you're here and you're in this room full of, I mean, I guess 3 of these guys are Hall of Famers now, right?
Well, and I was the only outsider because if you go back, Mark, Kurt, Matt, Carl, everybody had come through the whole Roush system. And so they didn't know any different. And I think that makes it a lot different because if that's just what you've been raised on, you don't know that there's different race teams are all run differently. For me, I was the first guy that Roush had hired, I think, from outside the system. What was it? The Gong Show? What was that?
Yeah, you were, you were a kind of a paradigm shift. You're the first person that I remember we went out and really got from another team that had success.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably what is a little bit of a culture shock for me. I mean, those guys, and I'm still really good friends with Matt and Greg. I never really, asked Matt, like, when you went to Gibbs, like, were you blown away at how different it was? I've never had that conversation. I should, but for me it was different. And I say all of that. I say it kind of laughing, but I also am serious. Like this was a Roush back in the day was a tough environment.
It was, and it's funny. I could remember talking to Jack about you after you left, and he actually, he was disappointed that,
yeah, we both were
that he was disappointed that you didn't like, you know what I mean? Because to him, he thought a lot of you, and really wanted it to work out, and I remember talking to him, and he was like, I have no ill feelings. It just
I didn't work for him,
but
I didn't either.
But you wouldn't, and that's the weird thing about Jack is you would never even think he would have those.
That he has feelings.
That he had feelings, right? And at the end of the day, it was kind of because you were the first. That paradigm shift, and it kind of didn't work. And I think in some ways maybe that made the place take a look at itself because we after that they changed things different, and it is a completely different place. And it was and it's evolved even before Brad got here. The world evolves. You can't you can't be. Mark used to have the funniest statement about Jack. I would tell Mark, I would say, well, Jack wants to do this, and Mark would say, well, he probably wants to do it barefoot in the snow and walk uphill while he's doing it at the same time, right? And that was
Jack.
That was Jack.
That would be my perception of him for sure, 100%.
And for a while, for a long time, it worked.
Yeah, it was really successful. Yeah, for sure.
I think that goes hand in hand with a lot of things. And Jamie McMurray, our guest here on Backstretch Banter, as you're talking, I told Jamie, and the reason Kevin knows who I am is what I do in the world of college football for SiriusXM. And that reminds me a lot of football. Back in the day, we had a lot of those kind of hardline coaches. Nowadays, things have had to adjust with the times. And I'm curious because I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I want to dig into it. From your perspective as a former driver and a father of somebody who's trying, to have success in the sport, how important is fit from a cultural perspective, certainly equipment matters. And I've always wondered, like, how many of these drivers are equal or close to each other when it comes to actual driving skill, and how much of it's actually the equipment, but how much of it too is being in the right environment, working with the right crew chief. And like, okay, let's say a first round quarterback goes number 1, goes to a bad system like you have in Carolina right now with Bryce Young. It's a disaster. Can that happen in NASCAR too, with a guy who's got all the talent in the world, but he's not at the right place?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I would tell you, I think you cannot compare racing to any other sport because we play on a different field almost every single weekend. And if you like in football, if you have a gift of whatever that gift is, it's almost the same every single weekend because it's the same field, same distance, right? In racing, you might have somebody that's really good at tracks that the tires fall off a lot. You might have somebody that's really good at Daytona and Talladega. You might have somebody that's good at short tracks. Like, it's really hard to be good at all of those different type of racetracks. So equipment is super important. Culture, I think, is everything, and it not just from a driver, whether it's a crew chief, if you're a pit crew guy. That I just think that is one of the most important pieces to the puzzle is feeling like you fit in, feeling like you're accepted. I don't know that anyone ever puts enough value on the confidence that you get from your team believing in you. And it's one thing for people to say they believe in you, it's them showing it. And everyone deals with that differently. I've had teammates over the years that act like they just don't care. But the reality is everybody cares. It's just some of us are willing to let our guard down and express like, well, this is important to me, and I need this piece, where some guys, put a little bit of a front up and they don't want you to know that that's important. But I just think it's hard to compare. It's hard to compare the ability of drivers because like part of what makes Kyle Larson's a good example. Part of what makes Kyle Larson so good is that he's good at a lot of different type of racetracks. There are some drivers that are going to run well at Daytona and Talladega, but they're going to struggle when you go to Pocono, whatever those tracks are.
Sure.
But there are some that just have a gift and they can do it at almost any type of a racetrack we go to, and that's what makes them so special.
I find that fascinating. I do, because I've always wondered, especially Talladega and Daytona, how much of that is car, how much of that is driver. All that kind of stuff, right? I think certainly factors into it. One more, I don't want to forget it, and we'll get back into the Roush days and all that before we break here, or after we break. But as far as the season that we're in right now, I got to know your thoughts from a driver's perspective. What is going through Denny Hamlin's mind right now as we go into this last week before the Final Four? Because everybody talks about this guy from a great driver, never won the championship, and he's not a spring chicken, right? So what do you think he's going through this week?
Well, my opinion is that Denny doesn't have to win a championship to be a Hall of Famer.
Himself.
Yeah. I mean, I just, Denny, like I said with Mark, Denny's going to go down as one of the greatest ever, and he's good. He's one of those guys that can win at Daytona, he can win at Martinsville, he can win everywhere in between. If you had to be, critical of him anywhere, it would be at a road course. That seems to be his only weakness, but he's still really good at road courses. And I'm friends with Denny, and I feel bad for him because I would like to see him win a championship because I think for him, he doesn't have to have that, but that's the icing on the cake. And listen, Denny clearly he could have won this weekend. He could go to Martinsville and he could win this weekend. I think that he almost feels like the cards are stacked against him a little bit. This year it looked like he was in a great position. Maybe he has a shot at winning the regular season championship, and then he loses all those playoff points because of the engine seal issue. And I think internally, if you're Denny Hamlin, you're just like, what do I have to do? Like, why me? Like, for all the great things that's happened, he's also had some things out of his control.
Sure.
Take him out of that position. But I don't know. I mean, I would love to see him be able to go to Phoenix and to be able to race for that championship. But as we mentioned, a little bit ago, the playoff format you have to be good at the right time. You don't just have to be good. You have to capitalize when those moments arrive. And it looked like he was going to do it at Homestead, and unfortunately his car just was not quick enough at the end.
It's so situational, right? I mean, it's the same thing with Mark. I just said you have a caution at Talladega. He wins the chance. He's no better driver.
Right. No different of a driver. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important when you get asked that question about Denny and the championship. I don't. He doesn't have to have that. Like I would tell you that he's as good as anyone. And you know, if you look at Ryan Blaney last year, I don't think anybody had Blaney picked as the guy that's going to go win the championship. But he got hot at the right time and earned it and did everything he needed to do. And he's proved it again this year that he's a deserving guy to go race for another championship if he can get through at Martinsville. So no, I mean with Denny, it's kind of heartbreaking on the your emotions and your perspective on drivers change the longer you're away from racing. Like I would not ever have said that being in the car. But the longer you're away, the more you can kind of sit back and I think appreciate what all these guys have done and the heartbreak that they share on the weekends.
I'll say one thing. It's funny. It's almost like when it's in Denny's situation or like Mark, they want it so bad it just makes it. I can remember Jack wanted to win that championship with Mark so bad because they were so. I think they finished second 4 times, and then all of a sudden Matt wins it, Kurt wins it, and I will never forget. I was with Jack in a car service in the second championship, and he was doing a phone interview. And he literally told the media person, he said, I was really mad about it last year, and I'm not as mad about it this year. He's talking about winning championships because in his mind,
he wanted Mark to be that guy.
He wanted Mark to be that guy so bad, and he literally – it almost angered him that it didn't. He wasn't taken away from their championships. He just thought it should have been, all of them. And,
I get it.
And it's crazy. And it's like you wanted it so bad with Mark, you couldn't quite get it, and then not that the other two fell in your lap, but nobody saw either one of those coming.
No, it's I mean, and I don't know it. I honestly I think it's probably harder to win the championship now with the playoff format than what it was for Mark, because I mean he came so close because it was just attrition and putting together the whole season. But now, God, you just gotta get hot at the right time.
Got to get hot, got to get a little lucky, and hope for the best when it comes down to Phoenix, no doubt. Jamie McMurray is our guest, former Roush driver, Fox Sports analyst. When we come back, I'm curious what it was like for you to get out of the race car and move on to an analyst role, and we'll talk about it around the corner, because I'm curious if you felt it was hard at first to be honest as an analyst. Let's talk about that when we come back on Backstretch Banter with RFK. We're back here, Backstretch Banter on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. I'm Chris Childers, Kevin Woods hanging out from RFK today as my co-host, Director of Marketing and Communications. And our guest is the great Jamie McMurray of Fox Sports, the former Roush driver who is also with Chip Ganassi. We got to get into his days with Matt McCall, and we'll do that in just a second. And Matt's given us some specific instructions. But before we do that, when you joined Fox, I'm pretty sure you were right out of the race car into the Fox role, if my memory serves me correctly, and it wasn't that long ago. What was that like initially? Did you feel any intimidation? Was it hard to be honest about what you were seeing, or did you transition nicely?
Yeah. So I didn't have any intentions of doing TV.
You did not? Okay.
No, I thought when I was done driving, I was like, I'm just going to be the guy. I'm going to be Ricky Rudd. I'm going to just disappear and go do family stuff. And not that I just didn't see that as even being an option. And then as I don't know, the races were closing down, I had a meeting with Steve Craddock from Fox in my motorhome at Homestead. They were going to take the Hollywood Hotel off the road. They were building this new studio, and they had a position for me, and it seemed appealing. And so, TV, I've really enjoyed getting to give an opinion, a driver's perspective on what I feel like drivers are going through. It's been a great way to kind of give back to the sport and still be engaged with fans, with the teams, and zero stress. I can't the stress of racing a car every single weekend and wondering if your sponsor is going to come back, wondering what just is your pit crew going to leave. Like there's just a million things when you're involved every weekend with a team that's stressful and you don't sleep. And TV, I'm like, gosh, I get to still be a part of all this, and I sleep every night, and I enjoy. Like you can go to Martinsville this weekend, and half of them can run out of brakes, the other half can blow up, and I'm like, I don't care. Like it's like I hate it for all those guys, but it doesn't change my life at all. And so, yeah, the TV's been a lot of fun for me.
It's been fun to watch you. I'll tell you that. It's been a blast to watch you. It seems like you're having a lot of fun, and I think viewers appreciate the driver's perspective. They appreciate a guy that, especially that was just doing it not long ago, that knows all these guys. Most of these guys, at least, you've competed against. And, does it give you a different perspective of your former competitors when you get on this side of it? I know it gets so emotional. Even, we've had situations this year with Chris Buescher and some drivers getting into it after the race, politely, not quite like we saw with Stenhouse and Kyle Busch, but we've had, some run-ins this year. But has it changed your perception of the way guys drive and make things more understandable, less understandable of how they approach their job?
It's unfortunate that you can't do TV first and then go race the car, because if you could, from being
see
in
it different, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you see everything different.
Yeah.
And even if it's just an interview or where you're trying to get with an interview, like there's no agenda. You're just trying to get good information, out of these interviews. And when TV asks you to do something, prior to doing it, you don't quite understand it. You don't get it all. You mentioned like being friends with all these guys. I've been super fortunate that my kid is racing now. And that has allowed me to not only like know all the guys that I raced with, but I've got to meet almost all of these younger guys that have come up because they did karting or they're just still at the tracks that we're at with legend cars, or they're friends with the team. And so a lot of these drivers, whether it's Connor Zilich or William Zawalich, some of these guys, like I've got to know them just through Carter, and it's great because now if I talk about them on TV, I have some kind of behind the scenes, like I genuinely know a little bit about them or their family or their background, and so it's been super helpful.
Woodsy, you got something else? Because I'm curious to know about Carter, but I don't want to step on you. What you got, bud?
I was going to say. I mean, they said Matt McCall said you tore his race car up during a practice at Dover, and he rebuilt it before the next practice. Is that true?
I think what Matt is referring to is
there was an oil line.
Well, I wasn't going to tell him that.
Yeah, I
he didn't say. He didn't blame
that I remember this, but just to set it up, everyone knows Dover. It's high banked. It's really fast. There's actually no faster lap times run at Dover than on Friday. As soon as the cars would unload, when the track was green, you'd pull out, and about your third or fourth lap would be the fastest lap you'd run all weekend. It was not that you'd run wide open around the whole track, but it was one of the few tracks that every driver will tell you the first few laps, you're like, man, this is, even though you just maybe ran Talladega, it feels really fast. It also has really hard walls. And that particular year, third or fourth lap of practice, Danica Patrick, her rear end plug fell out, and it oiled the track down, and I hit the wall, and I remember hitting the wall, kind of. And what happened was there was all Tony Stewart and Danica were also involved, and their cars were. I stopped in the exit of turn 4 where I'd hit the wall. Their cars stopped down in turn 1. No one really even knew I'd wrecked because they were tending to Danica and Tony. But when I got out, I knew I was 100% sure that I was concussed because I was a little bit dazed. But I also had this massive knot on my arm where it had hit the seat, and I couldn't get my suit down because it was so swollen. And I was like, man, I'm hosed. Like there's no way when I get to the infield care center they're gonna let me race. I go to the infield care center, and they don't realize I've been in this wreck. And I'm like, don't look them in the eye because I was pretty sure I was a little bit cross-eyed at this moment. I get out of the infield care center, and practice had just started, right? I go to the infield care center. 20 minutes later, I get to the hauler. When I get to the hauler, the last thing I want to do is race this car. I'm like, oh my God, my head hurts so bad right now. And they're unloading the backup off the lift gate. And I'm like, oh, I hope there's not enough time to get that thing ready to go. I'm like, 'cause I don't want to get in it right now. So I go in the front of the hauler, and Matt is sitting up there, and he knows, right? He's looking at me. He's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, no. I'm like, my head hurts. I'm showing this big knot on my arm, and he's like, well, we'll get the backup, we'll get it ready, and we'll go out and make one mock run. Well, I'm like, well, the last thing I want to do is make a mock run. That's when you drive the hardest you can.
Yeah.
So anyway, we end up doing it. It rains qualifying out, which is a blessing for me. But the one thing I would hit on with Matt is that, I was his first driver to be a crew chief for. He was a former driver, an engineer. He, to me, is the model of what that's what you want for a crew chief. Like, you just couldn't get a better fit of somebody that has driven a car, and also someone that understands not just how the car works, but the mechanics of the car, and can read sim. Like, I really enjoyed getting to work with Matt, and I don't know of anyone that wanted to win any more than he did. And when Brad actually came over here, he called me about Matt and that team, and for the most part, the 6 car is the 1 car team. Almost all those guys came from there. So Brad got a great team, and Matt leading that was a good guy.
And Matt McCall,
he's a great guy.
He was a Gong Show guy too. He was actually on the
ironically
TV show.
Was a guy,
Yes.
And he could kick your ass. I can tell you that, because he's like a black belt in, I don't know, 50 different things, and he's huge. So yeah, he's got it all.
He is kind of yoked, man. When you see him, he is. He's got a look in that hair. He's like,
he's got it all.
Definitely has that vibe that he's gonna come kick your ass.
He can do it.
No question. There's no question. Let's take our final break. We'll come back. Let's talk a little bit more about Roush Fenway Keselowski. This is Chris Buescher birthday week, so we'll celebrate Chris and talk about his season. Jamie McMurray is our guest. Chris Childers, Kevin Woods on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on SiriusXM NASCAR Channel 90. We are back here, Backstretch Banter on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio Channel 90. Want to thank everybody for helping us put the show on. The great Brandon Lee with RFK. We got Thomas Burfield and Elijah Burke behind the scenes. Alec Walt, our SiriusXM producer, and usually I think Kevin Woods, but not today. He's co-hosting the show. But Woods, you've been an absolute delight. Filled with energy, as Jamie mentioned earlier, as always. And I always kind of I vibe off that energy. It kind of lifts me up. It's like a hit of caffeine in the morning. Jamie, it's Chris Buescher birthday week. We're all excited about it here. Everybody, literally everybody I've ever talked to with RFK, whether it's media, whether it's tire changer, whether it's whatever, they love this guy. They call him the most genuine, humble human being that ever lived in the world of NASCAR. What is your perception of the driver of the number 17, which this week, I should note, is the BuildSubmarines.com Ford Mustang? But how do you view Mr. Buescher and his place in the world of NASCAR?
Home of Prosper, Texas, right? Like 30,000 people.
Yes.
Am I correct in that?
Yes.
I think I remember Rick Allen saying that at the end of one of, it was Richmond, maybe, the win, right?
Yes, epic.
Yeah. Epic, yeah. So I would tell you that Buescher is like a surprise to me. And when I say a surprise, it's because he came from this legend car background, and he's shown up, and obviously he's good at about every type of a racetrack. But his road racing skills are just incredible. Like, and I don't know where that comes from. He doesn't look like a road racer. Like, nothing about him screams road racer to me. Yeah. But he's done a great job. And I know that when Brad first started over here, he talked about Chris, being one of the most underrated drivers, and Chris has shown that. It's been pretty impressive. It seems like with this new car, it's jived. He's been able to figure it out quicker than others. But he's done a great job in that car, and super pumped for him. How old is he?
How old is he, Woods?
How old did he turn? Nobody knows how
I don't
old
know.
he
I think I met him when he was like 11.
He's loved, but no one knows how old he is.
He was like 11 years old when I met him.
He was 11?
It seems like it. He's been here forever.
Look it up. Go ahead.
I'm looking it up right now.
I'll tell you, when I met Chris Buescher,
32. He's 32 this week.
Trevor Bayne, I cannot believe he's 32. Trevor Bayne had gotten sick
Yep.
And he was supposed to run an Xfinity race, and they told me I needed to go pick this kid up in the airport in Richmond. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning or something. And I pick him, and he gets off the plane, and he's got this bowl cut, like he just straight.
He still has the bowl cut.
No, nothing like it.
Not like it was.
He is Ric Flair styling compared to what he looked like back then. And he gets off, and he's got his helmet, and he looks like he's 10 years old. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And he's just the nicest kid, and it's been wonderful seeing him succeed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The greatest guy, literally the nicest guy I've ever worked with in any sport. Jamie McMurray is our guest. So before we let you go, we got a few minutes left. We've had a few years now, a little sample size of Brad Keselowski as an owner driver. He's like the Paul Newman of NASCAR. What do you think about Brad in his role as owner driver?
I don't know. When I think of Paul Newman, I just don't see Brad. I'm not sure. Did you
don't have that slap shot?
I don't know. That movie star thing just
yeah.
didn't pop right out at me. That's a good analogy. I think Brad has enjoyed getting to be over here and be a part of this. I mean, he thinks differently. I mean, that's one thing for sure. I've spent some time with Brad and clearly, he views things a little bit differently, but I think it's been good. He's also really outspoken, and I think in his position that's good to have someone that's not scared to speak up. But yeah, it was really hard to get used to saying Roush, Keselowski, like that was it just didn't roll right off the tongue, right?
Roush,
But
Fenway, Keselowski,
it's become a little bit easier to say now. So yeah.
Yeah, I think to many people it's going to be Roush forever, but
yeah,
then it
in
was
my
RF,
mind it is, yeah,
and then RFK, but yeah, it gets easier. You once I stare at that logo behind
RFK,
you every week, yeah,
RFK.
So it's gotten quite nice. It's been a blast. It's really been fun to get to know you and get to sit here and talk about the Roush days. Kevin, we got like 2 minutes. If you got one last thought for Jamie.
Yeah, let's do this, Jamie. You talked about it being a little bit of a tough transition here, but when you look back, what stands out as maybe one of your favorite moments as a driver here?
At Roush?
At Roush.
You know what? Probably the friendships with some of the other drivers. When I came to Roush, Kenseth and I were the two biggest enemies. Like, he was probably the one guy that I didn't like in racing. and then our wives, Katie and Christy, became friends. And then Matt and I became friends. And Matt will forever be one of my friends. We're both big and passionate about running and right now. And so going to do the Huntersville half with Matt in December. And, our kids have kind of grown up around each other. And Greg, David Reagan, I still work with him at Fox or did up until June of this year. So yeah, probably just some of the friendships and stuff that I made.
I can remember when David first came along, we'd go to appearances and stuff, and you guys would give that guy hell. Y'all were
I love David.
Y'all were vicious to him.
David's so he's got this dry sense of humor. He's really fun to be around. I enjoy getting to be around him. It's cool. I've seen Carl has popped back up out of nowhere again. Like, Carl kind of disappeared for 10 years, and all of a sudden now Carl's back.
He's out of the bunker?
Yeah, I don't know if he's out of it. He came out of it for a little bit, yeah.
Well, last thing, what about Greg Buffalo, great American hero?
Wow. No kidding. It's
I
been
think
pretty,
we have him coming on here in a week or so.
It's been pretty interesting to follow Greg, and kudos to him. That guy just gave up whatever he was doing for 2 or 3 straight weeks and did so much for those in the mountains. So yeah, that was pretty awesome to see him doing that. Our kid, Greg's daughter Emma actually goes to school with Carter. They're in the same class. So I stay caught up with Greg quite a bit.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool. And we all appreciate what Greg did for all those people that needed it. Yes. Jamie, we appreciate you. We appreciate you for the time, for coming by and having to relive some of the moments of hell being in that
That's right. That's what it was. Hell, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm glad you guys could laugh.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on.
It's enduring.
All right. That's
happy Halloween.
I want to thank. Yes, happy Halloween to all. Everybody go vote. Don't forget. Kevin Woods, we appreciate you. I'm Chris Childer. See you next week on Backstretch Banter.